Hey, welcome back. In this lesson I will give you an overview of all the interface elements of OBS Studio, because I can imagine that if you're launching this for the first time, you have no idea what all of this stuff is. I'll go over the menu on the top, then these modules on the bottom, and then the buttons here on the right. Now, to be honest, the top menu here on top, a lot of these things are niche settings that you need when you're setting up a specific thing, and we will need the menu on top for future lessons, but I'm not gonna go over all of these options one by one, because each of these options requires an additional explanation, so we will get to this when we need it. However, there are a few things. So under files here you see settings. These are all your settings that we will set up in other lessons, but you can also find those settings here on the bottom right, which is where most people access them. Then edit here, you will almost never need this. It's to interact with things we're gonna add here in the middle on the preview, but once we add things you can always edit them by right clicking and then doing stuff, so this here is not really necessary. However, one thing you could use this for is lock preview, which will completely lock this right here, and this big black box here in the middle is where we will be building our stream. So if you're done setting up your whole stream and you don't want to change anything anymore, you can right click here and then say lock preview, or do it under the edit here, lock preview. Now under view here you will see docs, and these are all the UI elements that you see on the screen right now. So most of them are opened here. For example, the scenes, that's here, the scenes on the bottom left. By the way, just like with the plugin, you can take any of these elements and just drag them out and position them somewhere else on your screen. Let's move it back here. And the one thing that isn't enabled is the stats. So what this is a window where you can track the performance of your stream or your recording. So you see your CPU usage here, your FPS, you see encoding problems here, which is due to your PC's power, and then you see dropped frames here, which is due to your network lagging. So I'm gonna close this for now. Just know that it's here, and you can add this right here if you want, but I think if you use something like this, you probably position it somewhere else on your PC like this, in case you have a second screen, of course. So besides this, there's not much to explain. You can just enable and disable UI elements. Now stream elements, we've been over this. Help is pretty straightforward, and then tools, this is if you install a plugin or a specific tool, you can access it here. Now then the last thing is profiles and scene collections, and I'm gonna go over this later in this lesson after explaining some other stuff, because otherwise it won't be very clear what they do. So on the bottom here is what most people have all their questions about. We have the scenes, then the sources, and then the audio mixer. Now the scenes here, this is where you create your stream scenes. So your starting soon screen, your in-game scene with your game and your webcam, then an intermission screen maybe with yourself kind of full screen with some other things on the screen like your game really small, stuff like that. And we can just create a new one by clicking on the plus icon and then calling it in-game, for example. You just click on OK, and then these scenes here on the left you can just swap between them, and these act like folders that hold all the sources in the middle. So then the sources here, this is where you add all your elements that we want to be configuring right here for the stream. I'll give one quick example. I'm going over all these sources in the next lesson. I will be explaining what you can use them for, some specific things, some things not many people know that you can do. But for example, one of these is a video capture device, and that's your webcam. So you can also give sources another name. You just click on OK, and then these are the settings for your webcam. You just select it here, for example Elgato Facecam. You click on OK, and then this here is a source that we can now reposition and rescale and all that stuff in our OBS preview, which will be what the stream will see. So now on the bottom you can see in this scene here, in the blank scene, I made a source called webcam. Now if I go to the in-game scene, then I will have no sources here because we haven't made any yet. So we could now click on the plus icon here, and then we could, for example, add a color source here. Now this is the last source I'm going over right now. The other ones are for the next lesson, but let's click on OK. It's just a white color source. Let's make it full screen, and then as you see, I can now switch between these scenes here by just clicking on them, and that's how you will configure your whole stream with these sources in each folder. Now you see when I click on another scene that it's fading between them, right? And that's what you see right here, the scene transition. Right now it is set to fade of 300 milliseconds. If I make this 1000 for example, and I go to the in-game scene, then it's transitioning much slower. And I will add an animated stinger that will close and then open again. It's in the free graphics pack that you're getting with this course, but that's for later. The last module here on the bottom, besides these options on the right, is the audio mixer, and this is where all your audio sources will appear. The two main ways that audio sources or audio devices will show up here, or first of all, this is the main way. If you go to the settings here, which we will be using a lot, and then you go to audio, then here you can add all your devices. So for example, I can add default, which is my PC, and then as a mic device, I can, for example, add line 3, which is a microphone that I'm using right now. So I've added 2 devices here. I click on OK, and they will both show up here in the mixer. I'm gonna make it quiet just to be sure that it doesn't interfere with my recording, but any audio that's going to your stream will always show up here in the audio mixer. So the first way was through the settings, through the audio settings, which is pretty straightforward. The second way is if you add sources here that also have audio. So the most common way that this happens is if I go to the blank scene where we have our webcam, you can see that there is a third source now. Since this scene here has the webcam source, and since some webcams have a microphone built into it, OBS automatically creates one extra audio source for the webcam here. Now my webcam isn't recording audio, so you don't see anything moving, but if my webcam would have a microphone, I would see it right here. Now there are a few other sources that include audio here, for example audio input capture. I'm gonna go over this in the next lesson, but the really important thing to note here is that these audio settings here in the settings, right, these devices here, they will always show up in all the scenes that you create here on the left. If I switch my scene, then the desktop audio and the mic that we added is still there. By the way, I'm gonna change this to cut so I can switch faster. And so then as you see, the webcam source here, which comes from the sources here, only shows up when you're in a scene that has that specific source. Now it's pretty straightforward, but it can be confusing sometimes. So the audio settings always show up here, whatever scene you are in. And then when you switch your scene on the left, you can get extra devices right here depending on the sources that are active at that time. So for example, if I deactivate this webcam now, then the audio source of it will also get deactivated. I'm gonna enable it again. So there are two things left now, and they are really important. So we have these options on the right. This is how you will set up and manage the stream. And then on top here we have profile and scene collection. Now I already showed you the settings here on the right. There are a bunch of settings here. We have the audio, which we went over, but you also have the video here for your resolution, and then the output settings and the stream settings, recording settings. That's the main way you will be setting up your stream. The scenes and sources here on the bottom, and then the settings here on the right. Now the more you start using OBS, the more use cases you will have for it. You will sometimes record games with it, you will sometimes stream with it, sometimes you will want to record yourself with your webcam and your mic, etc. There will be different scenarios, and once you add more things that you do with OBS, you will have a bunch of scenes on the left and it will be a complete mess. So what people do is they create specific presets in OBS that they can switch between. For example, me right now, I'm in the Skillshare preset. All my settings are ready for recording and recording my screen, and I made that preset specifically for this. Now the way you create presets is by making a scene collection and then a profile preset. Now this can get a bit complicated, but it doesn't have to. So the new scene collection changes your graphics and then some settings, and then all the other settings that aren't changed by the scene collection here, those are being saved in your profile here. Now it is a bit confusing which things are in the scene collection and which things are linked to the profile presets. So for that reason, what most people do is they just create a profile preset, for example me, Skillshare course, and then a scene collection, which in my case is also called Skillshare course. Now I don't have it activated right here because I have a second instance of OBS running, as you can see here. This is how I'm recording my course, and I'm in the Skillshare profile and the Skillshare scene collection. So let's minimize this now. So what I advise you to do is go to profile, click new, and then call it stream, for example. You will have an auto config wizard. You can just cancel that and then go to scene collection, new, and then also call that stream. So as you see, when I go to profile and I go from stream, for example, to recording here, or I go to Skillshare course, nothing on the bottom changes here because this changes mostly the settings. But then when I go to scene collection and I change it, for example, to simple here, then this is a scene collection I once made. I'm not using it right now. I'm gonna go back to Skillshare course, profile, Skillshare course, and this way you should make presets for all the different use cases. Now the last thing I need to show you is right here, the settings on the right. So we have start streaming. It's in the big green button here. I will use this later to show you how to start the stream. Start virtual camera, we're not gonna use this. Start recording, I think you can guess what that's for. Then studio mode, I'm gonna skip it for a second. Then you have settings, we've been over this, we're gonna use this a lot. Let's close it, and then exit. This will exit your program. So then studio mode, this is the last thing, and this is pretty useful. When you click on it, then your preview will completely change, and I now realize I'm in the wrong scene collection here. I was explaining all this stuff while it was on blank. There we go, we have the webcam source, and then we have the in-game. So now when I change between these scenes here, you see that it's only changing on the left. Now the left preview here, this is what we are seeing, and the right one is what the stream will see. So what this is used for is, for example, let's say I'm on this scene on the stream, and then I think, well, I'm gonna change to the in-game scene. This way you can first preview it on the left. You can make adjustments if you say, well, this has to be this big. You can make adjustments before the stream sees it, because only when you click on transition in the middle here, it will actually transition to that scene on the stream. And you can even make adjustments to this without the stream seeing them. So I can reposition this, I can make sure everything is right, and when I'm ready, I click transition, and boom, now the stream is seeing the same thing as I prepared. Now this isn't being used a lot by simple streamers, and with that I mean people streaming on Twitch or YouTube for games, etc. This is mostly used if you, for example, run a professional stream, or let's say you do a podcast and there's another guest. You need to make sure everything fits, you need to replace the cameras, and when everything is right, you click transition and then the stream will see it. Basically, if there is no room for error on your stream, you want to do it this way, check if it's right, and then transition. If you're a normal streamer, then no one cares if you need to replace something or change the size of something or add a border, etc. Usually you will just disable this and then just switch between scenes here on the left, or with hotkeys, which is something I'm gonna go over later in another lesson. Now there is one last thing I need to show you in the settings, and it's extremely important, so please don't skip this. You want to go to the video tab here, and in this tab you can change your resolution. Now the reason that this is so important is that right now my preview is 4K. If I change it to 1080p and then I change this to 1080p too, and I click on OK, you will see that the preview completely zooms in. Since the resolution is smaller now, I will need to rescale everything, reposition it. So just make sure that in the settings, in the video settings, you make this 1080p right here, or 720p if your monitor is 720p maximum. Later in the stream settings, you can always change it to 720p right here in the output resolution. That doesn't matter. It's just a base canvas resolution, which is the preview right here, that needs to be 1080p, so we can start adjusting everything. If you're 100% sure that you want to stream in 720p instead of 1080p, you can already make this 720p, because that's a bit more optimized than making this 1080p and then later downscaling this here. So for me, this is good. Let's click on OK. I'm gonna delete this source and then delete this blank here, also this color source. And in the next lesson, I'm gonna go over these sources here and explain you what they all are, how you can best use them and adjust them, for example, cutting off a side from your webcam, etc. And there are a few things that you can do with this that you probably wouldn't know and that almost no one is talking about on YouTube, or actually no one is talking about, which is one of the reasons I wanted to make a course on Skillshare, so I will see you in that lesson.